Hey up everybody, welcome back to the Audio Cycling YouTube channel, where today we're going to be taking a look at the Velogames Tour of Poland. What we have is a lot of puncher stages at the Tour of Poland, so that might weigh quite heavily on the riders that you pick. There's a couple of sprint stages and there's a GC stage and a time trial, which is exactly why Joao Almeida here is the most expensive, because he can climb and he can time trial. I'd probably recommend everybody to put Joao on their team. I know that at the Olympics he didn't look exactly on fire, but I think this just makes sense to go with Joao, and you can actually make a very good team despite having a big 24-point rider on there. I think it just makes the most sense to go there. Kwiatkowski at 12 points I have on this team next. I'll go up and talk about the other 18-pointer, 16-pointers after this, but Kwiatkowski I think is a great value for money rider out of all the riders available. 12 points for a rider who came 11th at the Tokyo Road Race and was really not far off finishing inside that front group. He really could have finished 4th place, got a decent time trial, and also because he's not going to the Vuelta, he'll have his own chances to do well here. So I think Kwiatkowski is a great pick. But looking back at these other top riders, Diego Ulissi, again, probably for somebody who a lot of people will pick, just because he's a puncher who usually goes pretty well at this race. He definitely did last year as one of the highest scoring pointers last year, and he also has a decent time trial, which means that his chances of finishing on the podium is relatively high. Pascal Ackermann for 18 points as a sprinter I'd consider to be quite high personally, just because I'm not sure how many stages Ackermann will contest, but he is definitely the strongest sprinter here, which is why he would be 18 points. I certainly think he's a better pick than Teo Gegenhardt. Teo, I'd highly recommend you don't pick, because this parcours doesn't suit him at all. Really, just don't pick Teo. Honestly, just pick anybody else, but I just don't think Teo's a very good pick. Ackermann can go well over some climbs, so he definitely can be a good pick, but a bit unknown. I'd definitely feel a bit safer picking a lower point sprinter like Gaviria, perhaps, or even go lower and pick someone like Edward Turns for 10. Colbrelli for 16 is pretty much bang on the money as to where I'd want to put Colbrelli. Great puncher, suits a lot of stages here, will probably rack up a couple of 100 points, I'd say at least. There's certainly, I'd say, 3 stages he could contest pretty strongly. It's just a matter of how he bounced back after the Tour. Gaviria did pretty good at the Tour of Wallonia recently. Jai Hindley, I think, again, similar to Teo, his parkour doesn't suit him. He's not good at time trialling. I'd probably just avoid Jai Hindley. Mohoric has looked very strong. I expect a lot of people to put Mohoric on. There's definitely a possibility of there being a breakaway stage or two, and Mohoric fulfills that perfectly. He's got that time trialling kind of esque ability. He can sprint pretty well. We saw in San Sebastian he's got lots of form. I think Tim Vellens, on the other hand, is a rider who we haven't seen much of this season and hasn't performed in a lot of races. So although Tim Vellens in theory is a really good GC candidate, because he can time trial, he can possibly get some bonus seconds on the puncher finishes, I think it's a bit risky going with Vellens, and I think it's probably safer to go 2 points lower and pick Kwiatkowski, or maybe even Moscon, who could be Ineos's second card to play, because he looked very good at San Sebastian and the Olympic road race. Decent time trial, a decent sprint. I think that Moscon and Kwiatkowski is quite a dangerous duo to go with, despite the fact that I know that some people out there don't like Ineos, but that's fine. Remy Cavagna for 12 is quite expensive for just a guy who's going to do well on one stage, personally. You're, again, better off picking Kwiatkowski or Moscon, who'd contest multiple stages. Decker we haven't seen much of since the UAE Tour, so I'm not overly certain on his sprinting ability. Hodge is a good sprinter, but not world class, which means that, again, how many stages is he going to contest? How good is he's not very good at climbing, so maybe 2 sprints max from him. And he's not a guaranteed win, because Ackermann's probably faster, Gaviria's probably faster as well. So I'd probably say Hodge is like an okay pick, but he's not the first person I'm going to put on. I'll miss out probably some people from now on, but I'll just go through this kind of preliminary team. There's quite a few 8-pointers who I would be highlighting. Aliotti is one. He did well, came second at a one-day race pretty recently behind Nizzolo on a puncher finish, so he might have priority in GC over Fabro in terms of leadership at Bora Hansgrohe. Tobias Foss, great time trialist, Norwegian TT champ. Didn't look great at the Olympics, but I think this suits him quite well, especially since he's probably building towards the Tour of Norway, which is his home race. Another 8-pointer, you have Matteo Sobrero, who is apparently going for GC here, and a good time trialist, the current Italian TT champ, beat Filippo Ganna to that title. Quite light as well, so I think this is a good opportunity for Sobrero to really test out his GC legs. And Lorenzo Rota, who, not a name who I usually talk about, but Rota was in that winning move at San Sebastian before he crashed out on the final descent, so therefore his legs are there, and I think that's quite a nice pick to put onto your team. 6-pointers, plenty of those to go around as well. It depends how you who you think is going to get the most of the 6-pointers. You got Anielowski, who's a sprinter for the Poland national team. Not a great climber, so probably a couple of stages from him, so you might end up getting somewhere in the 200-point margin for him. Phil Bauhaus is another sprinter. Again, I'd expect him to get about the same as Anielowski. The sprinting battle is a bit of a lottery. Somebody could finish third. They also could end up finishing 8th and end up getting you about 100, so that's just a bit more risky to go with. Stefano Oldani, again, the sprinter for Lotto, but they might also be going for John Degenkolb, so just that's a bit, take that with a pinch of salt. Christian Sparagli I've really liked, because if you remember, he did I think he came 7th at the Amstel Gold Race earlier this year, which is a fantastic result on a very challenging circuit. I think he's probably the fastest guy that Alpes and Fenix have, and due to his ability to climb. You know, he finished 11th at the Giro dell'Emilia last year, which if you're a cycling nerd, then you'll know that that's a very difficult finish. So I think Christian Sparagli could be somebody who surprises quite a lot. Similar to him, following along the puncher kind of line, is Jake Stewart. Of course, the person who came second at Omloop Het Nieuwsblad. We're all very happy about that. Somebody who probably the fastest guy that FDJ have, which means that he'll more than likely be sprinting on the flat stages, and he's also got that puncher ability to perhaps do well on like stage 1, and you know, maybe on like stage 5 as well. That stage which we've seen Kwiatkowski and like Ulissi do well on, and Luka Mezgec. I think Jake Stewart fulfills that kind of role quite nicely. Ben Tullet, I think, is a great one which not a lot of people will be knowing about, just because he's quite an unknown rider, but he finished well at La Flèche Wallonne earlier this year. A puncher, comes from the cyclocross background. I definitely think he could succeed in stage 2, which I'd say is too hard for Sparagli. But Ben Tulloch, as an outside GC bet, could finish perhaps tops 20 on GC and could be the surprise package of the whole race, I think. So if you're looking for somebody who's a real dark horse for GC and maybe a couple of stages, I say Ben Tulloch is absolutely up your alley. Pick him for certain. In terms of 4-pointers, I'm really looking at guys who are good at team teeing, so I'm perhaps picking Ian Garrison. There's also Tom Scully here, Antonio Tiberi, and Ryan Mullen is around here as well. There he is, Ryan Mullen. I don't think Langeveld maybe as well if he's doing it. I'm not sure if EF have fully confirmed their roster yet. So that's it really for all the riders that we've just gone through. This is currently a preliminary team that I'm going with, so it's quite heavy on the GC because you've got Joao, Kwiatkowski, Moscon, Aliotti, Sobrero and Foss probably for GC, so that's, you know, that's 6 guys I think. I've got Mohoric currently in as a kind of a guy for the breakaway. I might swap him out for Colbrelli possibly, just because he might stand a better chance of doing, you know, stage 1 is kind of a puncher finish, stage 2 probably maybe a bit hard for Colbrelli, but you know, he definitely could survive it. Stage 5 is really good for Colbrelli as well. So it depends, like, do I go Mohoric and Rota, or do I go kind of Colbrelli and then take off Rota and put on one of the 6-pointers that I was recommending, somebody like Anielowski, or perhaps even Jake Stewart. He's a bit further down and the screen's gone really weird for some reason. Or I could go Ben Tullet as well, so you know, I could do something like that. Colbrelli and Tullet or Mohoric and Rota. These are the kind of decisions that are difficult to make, and really those are what your team comes down to. Is sometimes, is it this rider and this rider, is it this rider and this rider, is it option number 1 or option number 2? If you have those kind of deliberations, by all means put them in the comments below, or just put it on in Twitter at Paddy Blake with an extra E, because I'm really happy to give my second opinion on, if you need somebody to say, or like a unbiased opinion, which one do you think is better, Ben Tullet and Colbrelli, or Lorenzo Rota and Mohoric? How likely are they to get points? What's the kind of guarantee of them getting points? How many stages are they going to contest? What kind of stages would they contest? And are those kind of stages here in the Tour of Poland? Those are just things. So in summary, what we've got here is Joao Almeida. I'm certainly recommending. I think Kwiatkowski is a great pick because he's 12 points. In terms of the sprinters, Ackerman's very expensive, Gaviria's 14, but when you think about it, how many stages are they really going to be contesting? When you consider that there's probably, the last stage is a certain sprint, the first one is probably going to be a sprint. It depends how well the likes of Ackerman or Gaviria could survive like stage 3 or stage 5, which will determine which one I pick. We've seen Ackerman do well on the stage 5. If you haven't seen what that profile looks like, go on to Pro Cycling Stats and have a look over there, because they have them all sorted out. I think that's about it, really. I just a hint here. Edward Turns, I just have a weird feeling that he's going to do quite well here. Attia Volta could be a good outside GC bet. Mikel Frolic-Honore we saw do well at San Sebastian as well. Just because I realised that I just missed out the 10 pointers. Max Walscheid will do a decent TT and could do well on a sprint or two. But again, he's a bit heavier, so I'd expect him not to be that great at the puncher finishes. That's just what I'm saying. Andrea van Dam I haven't seen much of in terms of his form, so that's it really. Of course, like I said, if you have any queries, put them in the comments below. Whilst you're down there, give this video a like, and also click the subscribe button if you're a returning person, because I'd really like to try and go up to like 200 subscribers. That would make me really happy. All that's left to say is that we'll see you at the Vuelta, which is starting really soon, and also to keep your mask on, stay safe, and we'll talk to you next time. Salut!